For the last 40 years, the global economic status quo has been that technological advancements are made by well-funded companies in Europe and especially the US. Those advancements are then made into commercially viable products that get manufactured in centres with lower labour costs, which of course has primarily meant China. Those products were then exported all over the world, flooding markets with cheap stuff. The West got all of the high-tech jobs designing, marketing and manufacturing all of those products, global multinationals made a lot of money, consumers got lower-cost goods, and the countries facilitating all the low-cost labour got a source of income to develop domestic industries and provide their populations with a better standard of living than they could have got with basic agriculture alone. It was, theoretically, a win-win. But even if the parties involved in this process remained best of friends, which, spoiler alert, they did not, there was still the motivation for the low-cost export centres to want to claim some of those high-value roles for themselves by whatever means necessary. And well, that's exactly what has happened. In certain areas of manufacturing, China is now just as advanced, if not further ahead than centres in the West. And it's not just disposable consumer junk anymore. Sure, they still make a lot of the plastic landfillers found on Alibaba or Wish or Temu or Shein or whatever platform is popular in the given week you're watching this video, but that's in many ways just distracting from the fact that the country has become a global powerhouse in some of the most important fields in the world at a rate that's taking a lot of economists by surprise. Now, this is all happening while China is dealing with its worst economic conditions in decades. So the question for them becomes, is this a vital lifeline that could get their economy back on track, or is it too little too late? The question for governments and companies in the West is, what are they going to do in either case? So, has Chinese manufacturing really become a world leader? Can the country continue to function if Western companies pull their operations from its shores? And finally, are heightened trade restrictions going to be enough to hold these industries back? Running a business means managing various tasks: customer relationships, inventory, accounting, and more. The last thing you need is to waste time switching between multiple apps just to keep things running smoothly. That's why Odoo is such a game changer. Odoo is an all-in-one business management platform that handles everything in one place, from CRM to track your leads and deals, automated invoicing to streamline your accounting, to inventory management. Odoo covers it all. What's great about Odoo is how it simplifies our work. The interface is super intuitive and you can customize it to meet your specific needs. For us, the CRM has been a standout feature. It's made managing our sales pipeline effortless, from scheduling calls to sending quotes in just a few clicks. With AI-driven lead scoring, we can easily prioritize our efforts to secure the best partnerships. Odoo's modular design means you only pay for the apps you need, making it flexible and cost-effective. Try Odoo risk-free with a 14-day trial, no credit card required. If you're ready to simplify your business and focus on growth, click the link below to start your free trial of Odoo today. In 1978, China introduced a new law on Chinese foreign equity joint ventures. Although progress was slow and not fully recognised by onlookers until the mid-1980s, this first step allowed more foreign capital to enter the country and help develop regional economies, deregulating pricing and profit retention in special economic zones to a degree, where businesses were allowed to set up their own respective wage structures. The experiment paid off and the country entered the most intense period of economic growth in history. It also increased the pace of urbanisation as workers were drawn from the countryside into high-paying jobs in the cities. There was enough liberalisation to bring China into the world trade as a notable export competitor. Fast forward to today, and most see China as not just a manufacturer, but the manufacturer on the world stage. This had a profound impact on our own economies. Before the rise of China, something as simple as a toaster was a major appliance purchase that people would shop around for with as much thought as we do a computer today. But Chinese manufacturing allowed people to purchase far more consumer durables at a far lower cost. For decades, the Made in China label was analogous with poor quality. Sites like Alibaba, Wish, Temu, or Shein certainly don't help those stereotypes. But with efforts in the realm of quality control following outside pressure as well as their own growing understanding of how competition is changing, Chinese manufacturers, especially larger players, have led some members of the press to claim that once ubiquitous old shoddy Chinese manufacturing is a thing of the past. So has Chinese manufacturing really become a world leader both in quality and quantity? Well, yes and no. When looking at cheap items online, China is still almost always behind it, and that has a lot to do with financial viability. The International Labour Organization found that Chinese unit labour costs are about 20 to 40% of US labour costs. They are also low relative to costs in the EU, Japan, Mexico, Korea, and most other newly industrialised countries, let alone those that are already established. Put another way, making $5 portable speakers just doesn't make sense in places like the USA, where blind workers make $25 an hour. This was also due to a long-standing dynamic, one that, at least for a while, meant that not everything was made in China. Typical advanced manufacturing has been safer from Chinese outsourcing because labour is a smaller component of the total cost of manufacturing something like an aircraft, which is highly technical, requires a huge amount of research and development, and places a high emphasis on how much people inherently trust the product. These jobs require a lot more sophisticated manufacturing equipment with fewer, more skilled technicians than something like an iPhone, in which labour is a much larger share of the total end cost of the product. It was easier to keep this kind of advanced manufacturing in places like the USA and Europe because that's where the skilled workers and technical know-how was. But if China can make these advanced products just as good or better, then even the small cost saving on labour starts to look compelling. Regular old human nature and global perception plays a strong role in this as well. I always used to joke that I wasn't ready to fly on a plane manufactured in China just yet, but the recent news about Boeing means that people might even prefer the Chinese plane these days. The point is that for decades, China relied on foreign outsourcing and intellectual property to gain this reputation as a global manufacturer. So can the country function if Western companies pull their operations from its shores? The answer to this question can be found by observing China's climb up the services pyramid. It's been made clear that the country is the factory floor of the world, but now it's recently promoted itself into more senior roles. Now China is doing more advanced work like designing, research and development, marketing and managing in-house, where those jobs used to be kept in the West while the country just focused on making things. This is no laughing matter for Western economic superpowers, as for a long time the USA, and to a lesser extent large Western European countries, have effectively had the monopoly on global companies. But China has grown a lot in recent decades. Up until about 10 years ago, it would be hard to name any of their companies that operated outside of the nation's borders, and that's starting to change. Perhaps one of the best examples of a Chinese product that breached these barriers is Huawei, a Chinese multinational technology company that provides information and communications technology infrastructure and smart devices. The telecommunication company's growth has been so staggering to competitors that a number of Western nations have passed legislation to curb growth based on security risks. Now, a lot of these concerns were very well founded, which is another problem that Chinese manufacturing needs to address if it's going to push its own companies onto the global market, rather than just being an assembly shop for other brands. Britain in 2020 decided to ban Huawei and other vendors it deemed high security risks from 5G networks. Danish lawmakers in 2021 passed legislation to allow the screening of foreign investments to ensure they do not pose a threat to national security, and French authorities in 2020 told telecoms operators planning to buy Huawei 5G equipment that they would not be able to renew licenses for the gear once they expire, effectively phasing Huawei out of mobile networks. Of course, making the argument for Chinese products and services' potential as a national security risk might be valid, but it also has the convenient side effect of protecting Western companies without calling it trade restrictions. So how exactly are these new up-and-comers brute-forcing their way onto global markets? Well, it at least in part has a lot to do with government subsidies. Organisations like Stanford's Centre on China's Economy and Institutions have been tracking this development for quite some time. Their findings show that since 2007, China has required listed firms to publicly report direct government subsidies. Between 2008 and 2018, these subsidies increased from $4 billion to about $29 billion. According to the disclosures, subsidies were distributed for R&D and innovation, industrial and equipment upgrading, employment stabilisation and promotion, environmental protection, and general business operations. It should be noted, however, that this is by no means a perfect system, as the most significant determinant of receiving direct subsidies is a larger firm size, and the receipt of subsidies is linked with lower firm productivity growth and only modest growth in R&D spending in subsequent years. Additionally, higher employment levels appear to be mostly temporary, so China has to essentially keep feeding money into the machine to sustain this form of growth. Another element worth acknowledging, though, is that China possesses a very well-educated population with a system that places a strong emphasis on industrial skills at all levels, and lots of students are seeking an education abroad bring that knowledge back to China. This ongoing adaptation has been a top priority for China's government, and just 5 years ago they issued a rather optimistic blueprint for further development in the coming decade, focusing on establishing a modern, high-quality and balanced system for equal and competitive education, and marking a shift from capacity to quality. Of course, there's also the tactic that's given China a pretty bad reputation, one that's been applied fairly blatantly in almost every industry: straight up stealing. If a company manufactures its products in China, the conditions are that they have to work with a Chinese company, and in many cases, the products that those Chinese companies are making are reverse engineered and re-released as their own products with a significant cost reduction. There's actually a case involving Huawei and Akan Semiconductor, a US-based company that had developed near indestructible glass, which was promoted as the next great material to make smartphone screens more resilient. They've sent a prototype in the hopes of gaining Huawei as a customer, but the contract terms were broken when Huawei allegedly attempted to reverse engineer the product during testing phases, thus violating export control laws. And this isn't an isolated incident. There is almost an endless list of scandals where Chinese companies only collaborated with Western companies to make something of their own. A lot of Tesla's manufacturing went to China, and now there are claims that the Chinese-made Model 3s are better built than the American and European-made Teslas. In fact, China's BYD is now the biggest EV manufacturer in the world. Here in Australia, for example, BYD cars are already massively cutting into the market share of Tesla because Australia doesn't have a local auto industry, so it doesn't care where it gets its cars from. The company started off just making batteries for other companies, but they built the rest of the company around it, and now they have the good jobs in addition to the manufacturing capabilities, and they're bringing the profits back to China, not Western shareholders. Now, all of this is impressive given where China was a few decades ago, but there are areas that make the China success story a bit misleading. For example, a lot of China's growth has been predicated not on genuine value-adding manufacturing, but rather on building more houses than they need to use as investments. This is great for headline economic figures because it employs a lot of people and adds a lot of value because average people are willing to spend a lot of money on building a house. However, it's unsustainable. The property market has imploded, causing a huge pullback in economic growth, and economic issues like youth unemployment got so bad that the government just stopped reporting those figures. But with so much growth in these other industries, the former improvements could, theoretically, make up for that speculative mania and give the second largest economy in the world a way to grow in a more sustainable manner. If this dream of Chinese economic advancement does come true, it could be really bad for US companies in particular. In response to this, the US can, and already has, put significant trade barriers in place to protect local jobs, but the US is the most powerful economy in the world because of the global reach of its companies, and it can't really force other countries to also block Chinese exports. What makes this even crazier is that even with trade barriers, this export strategy is kind of working. China has the largest trade surplus right now of any country in history. During June of 2024 alone, the trade surplus in China amounted to approximately $99 billion. This, for now, is in fact offsetting the losses from the crippled real estate sector, but it's also making other countries angry, furthering calls for trade restrictions. Of course, one of the major arguments is that China's aforementioned subsidies are more political in nature than economical, with some even claiming that the Chinese skew markets, which leads to overproduction and the dumping of cheap products in the global market, trading hard-earned money for junk. And this by no means, as stated earlier, is a recent development. In fact, some of these concepts go back almost 10 years. An example of an ongoing battle can be found in renewable energy, specifically solar panels. Again, a very technical and highly value-adding modern industry at the forefront of global attention. About 7 years ago, the European Union had extended anti-dumping and anti-subsidy measures for Chinese solar panels, wafers and cells. But fast forward to the present day, and it doesn't look like this made much of a difference. Between 2022 and 2023, exports in this sector to Europe only dropped by about 9%. In terms of annual growth rates, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Malaysia and Pakistan all saw imports from China increase by well over 100% in 2023 from 2022's totals, and all joined the ranks of major markets for China's panels and modules. This really makes that 9% seem less like a massive victory and more like a drop in the bucket. At least for now, the Western resistance to the country's evolution may slow this progress, but it doesn't seem to prove that it can stop it entirely. The fact of the matter is that good enough and cheap for many consumers around the world is often preferable to something slightly better and considerably more expensive. But there are key domestic obstacles that China still needs to deal with. In addition to the real estate bubble, the country also has an ageing population and an expensive one at that. Even with the rise in wages, many Chinese residents can barely afford to live in places like Beijing. The cost of living just continues to rise. In other words, this complicated socio-political arrangement that the Chinese people have with their government only works if things remain affordable and the people can continue to make good money, something that's becoming a growing concern in recent years. If China can manage to sustain its growth, eventually making products that match the quality of other competitors with their reputation for quantity, and get pricing under control, there's nothing at the moment in terms of economic resistance that can stand in its way. That is, except itself. Whether or not China will be able to fully pull this off depends on if these new developments can pay off. If they can manage that and regain the faith of its people, China might not just break even, but it could very well emerge stronger than ever before. Now, we made an entire video last year detailing the extent of the challenges that this industrial boom has to overcome. We didn't want to repeat too much in this video, but as always, you should be able to click to that on your screen now. Thanks for watching, mate. Bye.